Welcome to today's panel on pivoting careers under a new administration. This is sponsored, it's sponsored by, we are shared with multiple different NASPAA schools that I'll introduce in just a minute. My name is Denise Fowler. I am the Director of Career Development and Alumni Services at the Trachtenberg School at George Washington University. I want to thank all of our incredible panelists today who have joined us, who I'll be introducing in just a minute. But I also want to thank the career professionals, my peers at NASPAA schools throughout the country who all collaborated on today's panel. Just going to run through the name of the schools: Goldman School at Berkeley, the Heller School at Brandeis, Batten School at UVA, Harris School at University of Chicago, Graduate School of Public and International Affairs, University of Pittsburgh, Rockefeller College, University of Albany, O'Neill School, University of Indiana, Mark School, Baruch College, Wagner School, NYU, and Schar School, George Mason University. So I would be remiss if I didn't do a shout out to all the schools who collaborated on running this panel, as well as we already have another one scheduled on April 9th. Clearly, the response was very strong from this. We love collaborating together. It's always better when we all work together. April 9th, 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have 4 panelists confirmed. We will drop the registration in the chat and would love to have you all join us. Unfortunately, one of our panelists just emailed me about 15 minutes ago. Andrew Abramowitz, the branch chief at USDA, is unable to now participate, and he sends his regrets. Just a little bit from logistics from people. Because of the large number of people who have wonderful response to join us today, we will not be doing Q&A. We will only be using the questions that came in advance to manage our time. And as a reminder, this is a nonpartisan discussion. So we ask everybody to really honor that. So with that, you are not here to listen to me. You are here to hear from these amazing alumni from all these different NASPAA schools and get their perspective about how to pivot under a new administration, under a different administration. We've asked each of them, and I will be starting first with Melissa, who's on my screen first, to provide a brief about 2-minute overview of their experience in the federal government, if applicable, different administrations they were under, how their own experiences, how they were able to successfully pivot, and kind of big lessons learned. So we're just going to start with that framework, and then we're going to be going through questions. So Melissa, I'm going to turn it over to you to start.
Great. Can you hear me? Great. And hi, everyone. It's so nice to meet you virtually. Thanks to my co-panelists. Nice to meet you virtually as well. My name is Melissa Mulholland. I'm a alumni of the Trachtenberg School at GW for my Master's of Public Policy. My undergrad was at Colgate University in political science. And so just a really brief overview, because I know we've got a lot to go over today, so I'll try to keep this really brief. Just to give you a little sense of my history, so if anyone has questions, particular to like health policy and that world, feel free to throw them in the chat or reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to engage with you further. But my experience is really in the health policy world. I began as a presidential management fellow coming out of the Trachtenberg School and went into HHS, working on then Vice President Biden's initiative for the Recovery Act in the budget department. But budgeting was never really my thing. I was not going to be stuck behind spreadsheets for the rest of my life. So I really, worked the networking and moved my way over to where the Obama administration was starting work on implementing the Affordable Care Act and health insurance reform. So I spent the majority of my civil service time in that group in CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, particularly working on the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. I worked in several different groups there, working on different angles of policy. I was able to do a detail at the White House, which was an amazing experience, and then ultimately came back to CMS to take on a manager role. And that was the point where I was pretty much solidly in the Obama administration. At that point, the Obama administration ended and Trump administration #1 came in. And that's the point where I, was sort of reevaluating things on a number of different levels. One, obviously, the political sentiments have changed. The work that I was doing was being impacted, but I also had other life things going on. I just had my first child. I was sort of burnt out and was just sort of, for many reasons, including the change of the administration, ready to try something new. And so, for me, I think it was a lot of luck, but a former manager of mine from CMS, from the government, had moved out to the private sector to the company that I work at now, which is HCSC. We're a large Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance company. And he just happened to reach out to me at the right time, right place, and said, we work together so great at CMS. I'm going to have an opening on my team. Haven't talked to you a little bit, but are you looking? And it just sort of all fell into place. And so I would just start off with knowing that the connections that you make, that you made during your federal service and that you continue to make, holding on to those connections, strengthening them, because I think it's really the federal government and people who have, dedicated themselves to the civil service really, to me, feels like kind of one big extended professional family, and folks who know and trust each other through those experiences, will reach back and will, look to someone with that type of experience really favorably. I'll end there, I guess.
Fantastic. We will go next to Terry.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be with you. My name is Terry Gullo. I'm a graduate of the Goldman School of Public Policy in Berkeley. Most of my career, except for the first few years out of graduate school when I worked in the nonprofit think tank center, was with the legislative branch at the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. I had done an internship for CBO when I was at the Goldman School, and that connection was really important to my ability to get back to CBO after graduate school. And it's one of my first and my number one pieces of advice for any students that are listening is that internships are a fantastic way to get into an organization. And at least my experience, and I think the experience of a lot of people, is that interns are very popular for rehiring as permanent staff because the organization, the basic work. So I would recommend that you.
Teresa, I think you're muted. You might want to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I'm not sure how that happened. Okay. I'm not sure how much I missed. So CBO, because it's part of the ledge branch, doesn't have traditional civil service protections, as most Hill staff don't. And so in my case, I served at the pleasure of the director of CBO. Because CBO directors serve 4-year terms, I was fortunate to have a long and pretty stable career at CBO, but every transition, every change in leadership in the Congress, every prospect of a transition created a lot of anxiety and uncertainty for people in terms of where is this going. That was certainly true for me, and it was true for my staff when I ran the budget analysis division at CBO. But one thing I learned over my time on the Hill was that adaptability is absolutely paramount in Washington. There's enough transitions, whether you're in the ledge branch, whether you're in the executive branch, that adaptability is really important. The 3 things that I think have, in my experience, have really helped people with that adaptability is networking and collaborating. And Melissa gave a great example of that kind of what can come out of networking and collaboration and connections. And I highly recommend that you really work at developing those types of connections, because that ends up being a really important way to pivot careers because of people you know and you've worked with, they know you. I also think keeping up with professional development opportunities and joining interest groups and other types of local organizations is also a way to network and understand who's working in the fields you're interested in Washington. Because the ledge branch of government is not directly affected by the executive branch, there's a lot of hiring going on the Hill. So I would recommend that you look at job sites. There's a lot of job sites, both in the House and the Senate. I don't recommend that you depend on those as the only place to apply for jobs. I think they're a good place to start, and they're a good place to figure out, oh, this office, this committee is hiring. Do I have any contacts that are connected there? So I don't think you should depend on them, but I think they're pretty important way in. Often, I mean, that is true in much of Washington, D.C., you have to pick a side. You're on one side or the other. But that's not always true. On the Hill, there are a lot of nonpartisan organizations that depend on people being nonpartisan, being able to pivot and look at all sides of an issue. You know, GAO, Library of Congress, CRS, CBO, even the architect of the Capitol. I noticed yesterday the architect of the Capitol has an opening for a policy analyst to look at administrative issues within the architect of the Capitol. So there's lots of opportunities there, and I suspect that you'll be surprised to find. I also saw yesterday that the Senate Budget Committee is hiring. So there are opportunities on the Hill, and that is one thing that I think could be an avenue for people who may be facing a transition out of the executive branch. I'll stop there.
Fantastic. Gracie, we'll go with you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gracie Rosenbach. I am a graduate of the Batten School with my MPP from the University of Virginia. I think I probably have less federal experience than everybody else on the panel. I actually just did my internship, my master's summer internship at USAID. And then I stayed on as a part-time intern throughout my final grad year and converted to a short consultancy with USAID. So that was a smaller stint with the federal government, and it ended just because my internship and consultancy ended, not because I was switching out due to an administration change, but I hope I can still be a resource for those of you who are in international development right now. I went from my grad year and from my USAID consultancy to a Princeton in Africa fellowship based in Kampala, Uganda. And so I was there for 1 year. And that was my intro into the food security side of international development, which I had no previous experience with. So if there's any students or recent graduates, Princeton in Africa is a great fellowship opportunity to get your foot in the door in the development space. From there, that definitely helped me get a position with IFPRI, the International Food Policy Research Institute, which is an economic think tank based in Washington, D.C. I definitely think the field experience that I had in Uganda with Princeton in Africa helped me get that job. And so I was with them in DC for 3 years before I moved with them to Kigali, Rwanda, to open an office for them there. So I think development is also maybe a smaller field than some of the other panelists here today. And so I think the power of networking is even more important than has already been stated, just because development is such a small field. And that's actually how I transitioned to my current role, still based in Kigali, Rwanda, with the Conflict and Development Foundation, which is an implementing partner for the Howard G. Buffett Foundation. And that was just because I lived in Rwanda. I already had my connections with the Ministry of Agriculture, and my predecessor had to find his replacement, and he was familiar with my background. That's kind of been my experience with a lot of roles is knowing somebody there, like Terry and Melissa were saying, and reaching out to them or having them reach out just based on knowledge and networking with people as you go. So that's definitely helped me in my career in development. And then also a lot of the connections that I made um, through Princeton and Africa Fellowship. That's a really tight alumni community. And then through Batten's alumni community as well, just as I'm sure all of the other schools represented here today also have really strong alumni networks. I've seen a lot of great resources being passed around within those two communities that I'm part of during this time. And so, yeah, I think it's great that all of these communities are rallying together to help us all in this transition. And yeah, I just can't speak enough about just relying on your network and even just keeping in touch with those, even if you're not actively looking with something right now, just keeping in touch, and you never know when you can help each other in certain relationships. So sorry, I don't have more relevant federal transition experience to speak to, but I hope that if there's some development people out there, that some of my thoughts can be helpful. Thanks.
Mark, before we go to you, I just want to add one thing, Gracie, and I meant to say this when everyone's talking about networking. Somebody reached out to me recently that I haven't seen in 14, 15 years that I just had a call with yesterday that I'm networking with about through some work. And I like to share, particularly for young professionals, they feel like they'll come to us and say, well, I haven't been in touch with someone for a year. I've just lost my job, or I'm worried. Do I reach out? That feels so long. And when this person and I talked last night, it was as if we had just had coffee the other day when we used to live in Boston. So don't worry about it feeling like that when you're leveraging your networks, particularly right now, if you're in a position where you need to, that it's been too long. It's not. So I wanted to share that as a reminder to people that it doesn't feel funny. Mark, let me turn over to you for your introduction.
Hey everyone, great to be here. My name is Mark Boyd. I was a federal employee for 6 years. I went to CUNY Baruch College, the Mark School of Public International Affairs, for my MPA, and before that I went to UMass Amherst. I entered government through the PMF program, like Melissa. I have been active in the PMF program even my time after my fellowship and with the alumni organization, and have been greatly saddened by its recent downfall. I recently, just January of this year, so I was like, I think it was a 2018 PMF, but I started in 2019. I think that's how that works. Started out at the Air Force for 1 year. I was at HUD for 4 or 5 years, and then at the Navy for a year, all in the field. So my whole career, I've been outstationed, so haven't been in Washington full time. And just in January, I transitioned from my Navy job to the city of Providence, Rhode Island, where I live. So I'm currently the communications director for the Providence City Council. So I have lots of perspectives on federal employment outside of Washington. That was a big kind of focus of my interest in the PMF community and the alumni community during my fellowship and afterwards, is sort of telling the story of I believe it's 80% of federal employees who work outside of the DMV. I think that's like an underappreciated aspect of federal service that I think people are seeing now as the effects of recent changes have kind of coming through, and folks are seeing people that they know and have worked with separating from federal service, either willingly or not, that like, wow, there's actually federal employees everywhere. In my very town, there are federal employees. So I have been, I greatly enjoyed my time in federal service. I did leave also for reasons unrelated to the recent tumult. My wife and I just had a baby. In my previous position, I was flying around a lot and having to go to the Navy Yard in Washington, and just generally kind of like pounding the pavement in a way I didn't really want to be doing anymore with a now 7-month-old baby. I also live in downtown Providence, so I can walk to City Hall now. So recommend walking to work if you can do that. That's the way to do it. Yeah, just really excited to be part of this conversation today. I think that conversations like this and the general kind of, while it's been disheartening to see a lot of what I've seen in the last couple of months, I have been heartened by the reaction of a lot of former colleagues in federal government and elsewhere in public service. I guess my sort of main plank in these kinds of discussions is a shout out to local and state government. Like federal government, almost every level of government is actually undermanned. We have empty jobs that need filling. If, as the federal government has seen fit to further reduce personnel and manning levels, on behalf of all municipal and state government agencies, are glad to welcome you into the fold, because we still need people at every level, early career, mid-career, later career, veterans, to be public servants. Public service still needs you. The country needs you. Your state needs you. Your town needs you. So if you really are still driven to serve the public and you want that to remain part of your career and part of your life, professional and personal life, I urge you to stick with it, whether it's in government or elsewhere in the public sector. We need you. We need people who want to serve other people, and there's precious few of them in the world. So I encourage you to look at your town, your city, your state. They're probably hiring and would be glad to have you. That's all I got.
That's a lot and wonderful. Thank you. Quentin, we'll bring it home to you for the introduction before we go into the questions.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Quentin Haynes. I guess I'll say hello from the West Coast. Not sure where everybody is located. I was a graduate of the New York University Wagner School, Graduate School of Public Service, proud graduate of there. I spent about 5 years within the federal government. I actually got my start in federal service. I graduated from Florida A&M University, undergraduate degree in public administration, went directly to the White House as an intern in the Office of Public Engagement and Intergovernmental Affairs, focusing on African American and minority business outreach. And in there, I got hired on full-time as a finance assistant in the Office of Management and Administration within the White House office. I then rose through the ranks, becoming associate director, and then finally as the head of the finance at the White House. And so that was my career there. I then left there to take on an opportunity at the U.S. Department of Commerce as special assistant and advisor to the Secretary of Commerce. At the time was Dr. Rebecca Blank. And then followed that by her was Secretary Penny Pritzker. And so I worked for both of them, as if many of you know federal government, as the body man. And so I was their body man and special assistant and advisor, traveling throughout both the country domestically as well as internationally, doing international trade and global competitiveness, in which was an amazing experience to really understand how America's reputation is set and looked at throughout the world, and seeing our leadership throughout the world. From there, I actually went to graduate school. And so my federal service was before I went to graduate school. And as I mentioned, I went to NYU. And what I will echo, I think Mark made a very good point about kind of his PSA around municipal local government. Is where I am currently working in government. And that's kind of my transition, that when I left federal service, went to graduate school at Wagner, I used Wagner to really pivot into the local sphere. And I think for many people in federal service, we've worked on very high level policy, policy that does have a true impact to our constituents and residents. But when you get on the local level, you actually feel that impact. You actually get to put a name to that person or that policy. And it makes it that much more impactful, that much more passionate about the work that you are doing. And so I would encourage, as Mark did, for those of you who are coming from the federal government or interested in federal service or interested in pivoting, local government, we're here for you. I'm definitely hiring in LA. So if you're looking in the West Coast and you're looking for a job in LA County, definitely reach out to me. Happy to have that conversation with you. I'll say before we start getting into the questions, I think part of pivoting in any administration, part of pivoting in any job, is I think that you have to know what you want to be known for. A lot of what we will be talking about, and what you probably have heard from either your counselors, your career advisors, is that question of, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I think that's such a cool question, but I also think that you have to ask yourself, what skill set do I want to get next? And that's the question that I continue to ask myself throughout both my federal service and as I pivoted from federal service. Everything Teresa, Melissa, and Gracie have mentioned as well, I echo, especially around your network, building that relationship with folks, staying in touch. I love what Denise said about, you don't have to continually be involved and connect with everyone every single day. There are too many people that you will meet in your public service journey. I just recently connected with Alex, who has reached out to me about this panel, and it was just like we've been talking for years, and it just was like a reconnection, and we just immediately jumped in. I saw Tom is on here as well from Wagner, and so I would encourage you, as you start to think about what is next, ask yourself, what skill set what do I want to explore? And I think as you start to answer those questions, it'll become clear to you some of your next steps. And so I'll leave it there. I'm excited to be here. Appreciate the invite and looking forward to participating in the questions.
Fantastic. This has been a great opening. And where I want to pivot now was I was on a webinar the other day, and they really talked about it. And in some ways, some people have time to be thinking big questions, sometimes not. And they said sometimes it's not time to be thinking about saving the world, and you have to be tactical, right? And we have to think about how to be strategic, particularly if you've got bills to pay right now for some people who are in these situations. So I really want to pivot into two areas for this next question. Specific action steps. We've talked a lot about networking, but specific action steps you took, as well as skills. Are there like specific skills or abilities that you found, as Quentin was just saying, is most marketable, right? Like that's going to help you make this pivot. And as you're answering this, were there ways where you message this either in your interviews, resumes, informational interviews about specific skills that enabled you? So really those action steps and skills, kind of being a little bit more tactical and pragmatic right now. And I'll see whoever wants to begin to tackle this question.
I can pipe in real quick. I would say a couple things. One is like, don't sell yourself short. Like if you are interested in like a policy area, or maybe there's a job that's available and it's a policy area that you don't necessarily are not necessarily an expert in. Like I know Teresa mentioned there was like an architect of the Capitol, opening. I don't know anything about architecture, but I bet, are there like administrative, things that are there? Are there finance things? Is there project management? I think there are, no matter what the sort of subject matter is, I think anyone that's worked in federal service has these skills of like, managing projects, collaborating across teams, getting things done, that you could find a way to mold your resume and mold your experience, I think, and not to get turned off by, perhaps not knowing the subject matter expertise specifically. And the other thing that I've found in my role and moving into the private sector is how bad a lot of people are at briefing leadership. I just like am blown away with like the skills that you have in public service, and you have to read things up. Like I'm frozen, but hopefully you can hear me. But those skills, I think if you can demonstrate that you are sort of not afraid of leadership and are good at, condensing things into easy to understand information that can help move decision making forward. I found that to be a real strength that I think I gained in federal service. That's been really helpful working in like a large corporation now.
One thing that I'll add is I have found, so I was entertaining a move to a lower level of government, for about a year before I actually made the leap. And I interviewed for a couple of jobs with the city and the state where I live. And throughout those conversations, one thing I found, a lot of feds work in customer facing organizations. I work at HUD for the bulk of my career. So I worked in the Office of Field Policy and Management at HUD, and we kind of operated the field infrastructure and talked a lot about how we can serve our customers better, get our customers being the tenants, folks that we serve that receive HUD subsidy. That was something that really was like attractive to every like state and city organization that I spoke with, was that I had the experience of at a high level talking about how we can better serve the people that government is there to serve. And because every level of government serves sort of the larger, like we, at a progressively higher level stakes. I have actually found that at like the municipal level, it actually, like in the building where I am now, Providence City Hall, it actually feels like the stakes are like a lot higher because we're like immediately accountable to the folks. And Quentin, you may have found the same thing. Like, you know, the closer to the ground you are, it's like the bigger league you're in. In fact, I have literally said that my moving from federal to city government has felt like going to the big leagues because I can't hide behind a giant organization or like a senior executive. Like the buck stops with like the 8 people that I share an office with. You know, like people have my phone number. Like my neighbors have my phone number and can call me and tell me that they're pissed about the way that like the potholes are, whatever. And like I live for that. But that was, you know, that was something that was really attractive as I had those conversations and that I could really sell about my federal experience was I'm used to discussing at a high level, like how we can serve people better. And like, now I'm ready to really pound the pavement and do it. I think that that's like, as I look to hire and fill our staff here, like that's what I'm looking for is people who are willing to like help us figure out how to serve people better. You probably got into public service because you like doing that. And that's something to really, I think, hang your hat on that people want to hear.
And Mark, if I could add to that, because I think that's a great point, and really kind of tie a skill set to it. And so, when you look at the federal government level, you're really thinking about numbers, statistics, trends, and policy, right? So that's really what we deal with at the federal level, right? We're not necessarily giving direct service to constituents, but more so we're looking at trends, data, and we're coming up with policies, we're coming up with frameworks, we're coming up with vision, and that's how we are putting forth, you know, whatever we're doing, whether it's legislation, regulation, et cetera. But when you start to get to the local levels, one of the skill sets that I would encourage many people to build out is that project management skill set, right? And I know we all say we want to be project managers, but there's actually a skill set in understanding and being able to take an idea from literally an idea to actually putting it in on paper and putting action items to it, to then being able to assign people to actually get that idea done and understanding what resources you need to execute on that, then actually executing, and then post-execution, reflecting and celebrating on your wins, right? And so when you think about a skill set that you would want to have as you navigate or pivot, pull out some of these types of skills: project management, data analytics. I will tell you that most municipal governments are starting to really look at data, right? We were not very data heavy, let's just say 5-10 years ago, but we are very data heavy now. We want to make sure that we are providing outcomes. Our constituents are becoming more vocal, as Mark had said. They know when when the garbage is not picked up on time. They know when their permits are being delayed if they're trying to get a building permit. They understand that because time is money, right? The longer it takes for building commercial folks, developers to get their permit, the more they're spending, the more they're yelling at the elected officials, and the more the elected officials are yelling at us. And so these are some of the skills that I think that as you worked in the federal government that you picked up on that could be leveraged on the local level, if local level is something that you want to do. So again, data analytics, critical thinking, project management, and just the ability to execute. I will say that time and time again, the ability to execute is something that is looked upon. If you can execute on an idea with little guidance, with very independent, you are golden. I will tell you, you're golden. I will hire you tomorrow, because that is not a skill that we see so often on the local level.
And I think bringing that into the development field, Mark and Quentin have really made a big pitch for local government, but that's maybe not the most applicable option for people who are coming from international development. Also, we don't really have a lot of the private sector is based on USAID funding, at least the US-based development private sector. So that's not clearly an option at the moment either. So I've seen a lot of like corporate social responsibility jobs come up with private sector companies that are not necessarily directly related to development, but maybe has a similar skill set. And then also I would say, if you're open and flexible to try to look at some jobs abroad, you know, maybe some other donors step up in USAID's absence and increase their funding abroad. And you can kind of try to capitalize on that. Of course, being in country helps. I don't know if, you know, if there's a few a few week internships or volunteer opportunities to get your foot in the door and then try to meet some people abroad. But you never know what's out there. So I think just trying to look for some implementers who seek funding from alternative sources, and being a bit flexible with location or with maybe corporate social responsibility. But I think to echo what Quentin was saying as well, especially in international development, if you're working for an implementing partner, you have to have those project management skills. You have to have that partnership and relationship building capability. Like, for example, when I switched to my current role, I had already been based in Rwanda. I knew relationships with the Ministry of Agriculture were crucial. And so I was sure to highlight those on my resume and in my discussions. If you've had international experience already, especially maybe in a conflict zone, that always kind of like brings up your experience to another level. So for me, being able to say that I had worked in some refugee camps and in Papua New Guinea before, that was seen as a big positive when I was discussing my experience and being willing to work in all kinds of different international spaces. So I think it's going to look a bit different for those of us in the international field, but I hope that those are some tips to help you.
Anyone else want to chime in about, like, because again, I agree with you. I'm a big fan of local government and state and local government, but also people, whether it's not international development, but also wanting to work on a broader, US scale, working on issues throughout the country that aren't, going in on a local level. Any advice for people pivoting now to be able to find those jobs, or had experience, whether it's associations, large nonprofits. We're running a program tonight at our school on how to find sustainable fund, nonprofits that have sustainable fundraising, be able to use things like GuideStar and looking at their financial reports. But would love if anybody had any perspective for people looking on that level.
I think associations is a really good idea. So again, I work at HCSC. We're a Blue Cross Blue Shield plan. And so I do a lot of work here with the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association and other associations, trade associations. That's been something I've learned a lot about coming into sort of the corporate and private sector world. And, honestly, there's a lot of people like at BCBSA, Blue Cross Blue Shield Association, that are my former colleagues from CMS, right? They really, I think associations, whatever the, subject matter is or the trade is that they represent, I think they really value having folks on board that have federal experience, because a lot of what they do is, try to talk to the federal government about why they should or shouldn't be doing something. They coordinate a lot of the comment letters for regulations. They kind of band whatever industry you're in together to kind of go forward to the government with a voice and with an opinion. And so I actually think that's a great point, is to check out, if you're have an expertise in a certain area, check out what trade associations are sort of the big players in that area, and they often really value that federal experience.
One other, a friend of mine pointed me to an organization that I think is new. It's called fedforward.org. I cannot vouch for it. I don't know a whole lot about them, but my understanding is it's former federal workers who are trying to help people transition and pivot to other kinds of, I think, government work. So like I said, I can't vouch for it, but it may be worth looking into.
Great. I'm going to pivot to another question now, and I'm not sure if anybody stayed in this role, and if not, we'll go to the next question. Be mindful of time. Did any of you, the question was that we heard from other people coming, submitted questions, was if anybody remained in the federal government despite differences between your professional and personal values and administration policies, and how did you navigate that challenge? So I'm not sure if any of you were in that situation, but if you could share this, again, staying nonpartisan the way you answer this.
I could talk a little bit about it unless anybody else wants to jump in first. So I didn't stay too long under Trump administration #1, but again, my leaving, I think if the other factors in my life, just wanting to try something new, balancing a family, just wanting to make a change for other reasons. I don't think I would have left solely because of the change in the administration. I think that was, part of a larger picture. But for the time that I was there, I think it's really important to really get to know people on a personal basis, right? Like I think a lot of things happen, there's the narrative. I mean, especially working in the Affordable Care Act, I mean, there's been like, kind of a narrative out there, a lot of stuff around that for a long time. And a lot of sort of bombast and political sort of, juxtapositions. But if you get to know, I mean, we had a political appointee come in to run the agency, whose views on things differed from a lot of the career federal staff. But we really felt strongly like we are the career federal staff. We are here to provide continuity. We understand things might go in a different direction, but worked with that person to get to know him. And most people are just trying to do their best. And I think formulating trust, even if it's with somebody that I think is a different point or different direction, I think if you can still formulate good working relationships and trust with them, that will really help you in times of where there is a decision and you are in that room and helping to move things forward. If you have the trust from somebody that maybe doesn't see eye to eye to you, that could still really, help with your ability to make positive change.
Anyone else to add to this question?
I would just say that I think it's an individual decision on whether you stay or depart, and you should make it individually. I know a lot of folks really kind of talk about, this is how the group thinks, this is how, we all think, et cetera. And I would just really encourage folks to make the decision that is in the best interest of themselves, their values, and what they stand for, which could encompass a lot of just thoughts. But I just wanted to say that out loud because I feel like a lot of folks are just listening to what everyone else is doing and not really taking into consideration how that's going to impact their life, their career, or what they believe in and what they stand for. So introspection, reflection, then you make the decision, regardless of whether you agree with the political stance or not. It's an individual call.
There's nothing more on that one. I'm going to pivot to kind of combining a couple of our questions together, being aware of the time. We all know right now the market is inundated, right? I see, I'll meet with several students all applying to the same organization or the same big names organizations. So I'm often, encouraging students to look at small organizations, medium size, really moving out of a geographic area, looking at adjacent. So I would love advice from all of you on what are some things that you feel like are untapped potential right now in a saturated market? And for people, when you think about your network, what advice would you give for somebody who is pivoting out from under administration, whether in federal government or they were in, a job that now was eliminated as a result of the loss of funding, how to build some different types of networks in this space where they might be able to uncover these untapped market, these untapped jobs that isn't what everybody else is applying for. So whether it's from your own experience, what you did, or what you're seeing would be really valuable. So kind of a two-part question there.
Two things come to mind, possibly neither of which are helpful, but just what was my experience. I got pretty far along interviewing with a state agency, and I was like pretty sure I was just waiting around for the offer. And then they called me and said, we offered it to someone else, but would you consider working in this other agency? And they like hooked me up with a person over there, and I talked to them and ended up taking a different job. But like, that was like a viable, like I almost took that other job, and it was something that I didn't even know existed and was not tracking at all, that I just came to because someone thought, oh, maybe you'd be a good fit over here. So I think, like we've talked a lot about networking. It's like such a tired word, but you really like, people, I think, in this climate know that we need to keep people who are interested in public service in public service. And like, I know that in a way that maybe I wouldn't have like a year or two ago, like if someone reached out and said, hey, you know, I really think that I'd be a good fit on your team. And I'm like, I'm sorry, like we filled this role, but like, I'd love to get together and see what I can do for you and talk about, you know, I think that there is kind of like a collaborative like energy out there in public service generally that has probably always been there to some extent, but I think we're all we've said before, we're all in it together right now. I think that's like a really like felt thing right now. My current job, I actually, this is like pretty unlike me. I messaged I saw this opening. I messaged the chief of staff on Twitter. I don't even like use Twitter, the site formerly known as Twitter. But I was like kind of Googling, like doing the like stalker thing you do with a job. I was like LinkedIn finding and like Googling like the organization and the people. And I like randomly just messaged this person and said, hey, like, I think the work you guys are doing is really great. And like, I'd love to be a part of it and just want to flag my application. And I kind of didn't think anything would come of it, but they did get back to me and say, oh, thanks, Mark. Thanks for reaching out. Great. I don't think that's what got me the job. Proceeded through the normal channels, but like, again, like there's so much energy right now, and like everyone sees the need to get people where they're going to be a good fit. Like literally people on this call, like reach out if you're anywhere near New England, reach out to me, because I know people at all the surrounding states and orgs and governments doing a lot of good work in this area, and like I will go out of my way to get you to stay in public service, whether that's like at a think tank or a nonprofit or a government. I think that's a sentiment that is really like ripping right now. And and now is a moment, reach out to people that you haven't talked to in 14 years or whatever, because they know that we all kind of have like a shared burden right now to get people where they need to be.
So I had two thoughts to kind of tag on. One of which is I think a lot of times in public service, we don't think of other avenues to still be in service to others. And so would encourage people who have an entrepreneurial spirit to think about if there's a social enterprise that they want to start, if there's a problem that they are passionate about, whether it be housing, climate change, sustainability, et cetera, to potentially start a business and look at what does that mean for them. That could be an option. And I think the other thing is, as we're talking about school, this may not be the most palatable thing, but elections, or I would say politics is kind of cyclical. And so we're kind of going through this wave of now we have 4 years in, and then midterms are going to come up, and then general elections are going to come up. I would encourage folks to be strategic about kind of what their next step is if they want to get back into the political space, governmental space, even on the local side. Local elections happen, and change happens on the local level too. You have city councils, mayors, county commissioners, et cetera. So understanding the cycle of politics and government is very important. And I say that to mean that if in fact you are just either graduating, or you want to potentially go to law school or graduate school or get another degree, these are sometimes opportunities for you to go do that and build up that expertise or that skill set that you want to do, so that when the cycle comes back around, you're ready to jump right back in. And so if in fact you are someone who was working full time, never really had a chance to really go to grad school or do that next thing that you want to do, this may be that opportunity for you to explore that, so that when you finish, you're ready to jump right in. So if you needed to build that skill in project management, and you wanted to get your MBA, or you wanted to do this entrepreneurial thing, and you wanted to try it out for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, here's an opportunity to do it now. And so I would just encourage us to think outside. There's so many ways that you can be of service to people. And nonprofit, as Mark had, I think, just mentioned, consulting, building your own social enterprise, all of these are options. And so I would just say, bet on yourself. I will say, if you bet on yourself, you'll never lose. And so that would just be something I would encourage folks to do.
Yeah, just to add on to what Quentin was saying, I mean, even if you don't feel like you can commit another 2 years to get another degree, there are lots of professional development certificates and other types of trainings that are much shorter in duration that that you can probably take advantage of. And as Quentin was saying, if you're in a transition period in your life, that could be a good time to look into those kinds of professional development training.
And I'll just jump in from the private sector perspective. You know, I think when I left public service to go into the private sector, it was with the idea that I would come back someday. And I think that, and I got some really good advice from some mentors on, you know, going into the private sector, you learn so much being in that space about, you know, kind of how things really work from the business side of things. And then, you know, so if you kind of have had your heart set on public service, but something appears in the private sector, you know, in a couple years, if you're interested in going into government, maybe going into a space, you know, that is in that same area, I think having the experience being on the business side of things is really, really valuable. I think, you know, if I wanted to go back to government, I think having this experience I've had the last few years is extremely valuable to have that sense of how things work, both on the government side and on the business side, and being able to marry those is something that I think is really valuable. So I would say, you know, don't discount the private sector, even if even you can look at it as a step towards, you know, being able to come into public service, perhaps even at a more advanced role, you know, with gaining some of that experience, if that's, you know, what's available to you right now.
And I would say for the development folks, like just to echo, being super flexible, and maybe that means switching to a different type of policy for the moment while we wait and see how things shake out with the development field. Or even like if you're interested in like global health, you know, maybe switching to the domestic health sector for a little bit and learning some of those skills. Or I'm in food policy, and my colleagues make fun of me because I work with farmers every day and I've never, you know, picked up a hoe. So, you know, maybe try to get some hands-on experience in the sector that you're interested in focusing on internationally. I think with international development, a lot of us are generalists, at least to start, and it's really just those hard skills. In my organization, we always talk about, you know, being scrappy. In another organization, we joked low maintenance, high reward. I think those are both good indications of how the development field works. And so if you can pivot slightly to a different field now, in a way that still proves that you have kind of those abilities for when hopefully the development field re-blossoms again soon, then you can dive back into that. Yeah, I think just being able to get stuff done, being able to work across cultures, all of these are skills that you can be building now through different experiences or through other professional certificate programs like Terry was saying as well.
We are almost at time because you all are doing this absolutely perfectly. We have the final question about any final words of advice for navigating a career pivot from the federal government. So I will, you know, open it up to all of you, what you would say if you were somebody who is on the other side of this. And I would say, let's be from pivoting career pivot from the federal government, or someone impacted recently by some of the changes, you know, some of the hiring freezes, because this is actually in all sectors right now, nonprofit, private, and public. So Melissa, I see you
Yeah,
unmuted.
I just want to reiterate what Mark said. I mean, I think the sentiment right now is so strong. Everybody wants to help. So like, don't be afraid. I mean, I'm getting like cold, you know, LinkedIn messages, but you know, somebody who was a PMF or somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows me. And, you know, I think in the past, I'm always happy to talk to people, but it might be like, oh, I'll get back to them later. I've been like answering those and, you know, reconnecting with people. Like, I just feel strongly that I want to help people, you know, get to wherever they're going next. And I know that that sentiment is shared by so many of my networks. So I would just say, like, if you're wondering whether you should reach out to somebody or not, just do it. I mean, so they don't respond, big deal. But I think for every handful that you reach out to, you're going to get at least one good contact.
Who wants to chime in next?
I would just say, you know, Quentin, I think mentioned in the chat, like someone said, what if I don't have any qualifications or experience? Like, you do. I mean, you do. Whether even if you I mean, I was a bartender for 5 years before I went to grad school, and that was some of the best experience I've ever had. And I use every day, especially now that I'm constituent facing. I use the skills I learned tending bar in Queens every day. So I would say have trust in your, whether you have a 20-year career that you have to kind of like hang your hat on, or if you feel like you're just starting out, like you do have valuable experience and perspectives. Like we need, there's a winnowing of perspectives happening at the federal level right now. That's just how it is. And other public facing and serving sectors need your perspective. Specifically, we need your specific perspective to join the fight. So I would say have faith in your marketability, like you are employable, and just the fact that you want to be of service, period, makes you qualified. You might not be qualified for my job, and I might not be qualified for the job that you're going to land in, but there is a solution that's going to be great for you. And just have faith in yourself and your skills, and just do some thinking and figuring on how you can sell what you have, because you do have something worth offering.
I would just say, first, take a breath, breathe, and don't feel like you have to find the next dream job. Don't feel like you have to figure it all out immediately. Your next step could be a passion project. Your next step could be developing a new skill. Your next step could be getting a certificate. Your next step could be starting a family. Your next step could be several different things that will add value and impact to your life. Your next step could be volunteering. Your next step could be joining another campaign or doing something else in government. And so I would just encourage you that with everything going on in the world, you do not have to figure it out all right now. You could find something that is going to help you and develop you over the next 2 years, and use that 2 years to then figure out what you want to do next. And so many people that reach out to me about career opportunities, I'm more than happy to help you. I'm more than happy to help you think. I'm happy to give you my advice. I will echo what Mark was saying. How I got to my path may not be how you got to your path, but I'm definitely, if there's anything that I can do to connect you, help you out, please reach out to me, LinkedIn. I'm sure they'll share some of our contact information. I know there's over 100 people on this call. It doesn't matter. I will get to you at some point. If I could be of help, please do reach out. And so echo everything that Melissa was saying. Use your network. That is how we all have gotten to where we are today. And it may not just be because you need a job for your network. It may just be the fact I need someone to talk to. And so that's what I would say. And best of luck to everyone on this call. I think that this is a trying time for a lot of us, even those that are in jobs right now. And so be sure you're taking care of yourself.
Any other last words? I want to thank you all tremendously, and I want to, before we wrap up, just remind all of you here, the NASPAA network is extraordinary. These alumni are indicative of who's in all of our networks. I know our school provides career services for life for our students and alumni. Reach out to your school that you're at now, or if you're an alum, leverage us. We are doing everything possible. All of the schools have been involved and engaged. Again, I just can't thank all of you enough. This was absolutely tremendous. It was both informational and inspirational, which is what I think we all needed today. So thank you again to the committee to help plan this, for all of you who are here participating, and to all of our alumni. We are here for you and will continue to be here for you. We all believe in service, and that's why we're here. So thank you.